This interview now, as South Africa commemorates 30 years of democracy. Let's look at how the arts and music have influenced our journey to freedom. I am joined in studio this afternoon by legends in the industry, that is Louw as well as Mercy Pakela. Mara, pleasure to have you on the program. Pakela, pleasure to have you both in studio.
Thank you for inviting us.
I'll start with you, Mara. Given your reflections, of course, as we look at this theme of 30 years of democracy and having also heard from various leaders, including now a PA leader, that is Gayton McKenzie, give us a sense of how music has contributed to what we now have in South Africa as democracy.
Music played a big role in terms of being part of the struggle. A whole lot of our artists who were in exile, and most of their songs were about free South Africa. Yeah. Let's free everybody. So music played a big role, although it was very difficult during the days of apartheid, because you'd come up with a song, and if the Afrikaans, the Boere regime didn't like the lyrics, that song would not see light of day. So, but it played a big role because people, you know, were influenced by even listening to certain songs and interpret those songs to mean something that we need to fight the struggle. And yes, we eventually got our democracy. You know, we are now 30 years into our democracy. Now, I hope you're not going to ask me how do I feel, because I've got mixed feelings. Yeah, but I've got more positives than negatives. I'm not going to lie that there's so many negatives. You know, sometimes we like to copy. You know, when people, it's like somebody says, I've got a headache, then suddenly the whole room has got a headache. But there are things that, unfortunately, they just took the sidestep, you know, they kind of went off the rails, of which I hope we can regroup and think about how we got to where we are and the reasons why we can never take it all back and allow someone else, some party that thinks they can take us back. Yeah. I cannot allow it. I'm going to speak for myself. And I know exactly who I'm never going to vote for.
Pakela, taking from what Mara has just said right now, but also taking your own reflections, when looking at the evolution of music, we had bubblegum music, we had the introduction of kwaito music in this country, but of course we've got new genres now. As you look at where the industry is right now, give us your own reflections on 30 years of democracy and also the contribution of music.
I would say, yes, music industry, in fact, creative arts fraternity as a whole, played a pivotal role in the freedom of this country. We actually, you know, liberated our country. And as Sis Mara was saying, our music was censored. You know, we could not say the right words because that music would be stopped from playing on air. And we had to use township lingo, you know, township lingo as, you know, iscamdo. You know, because Ayachisamateki it was a language that was spoken by young guys.
Like slang.
You know, slang. Yeah. You know, when during the apartheid regime system, when they were kunama riots or kustopwe, you know, in movement, yabantu abamnyama, you know, and when police come, guys would say Ayachisamateki, you know, and they would throw their sneakers up so that they know that place or that area, ithandwa ngamaBhunu. You know, you understand? So, so we had to music way to change. Our lyrical content had to change. You know, and yeah, I mean, for instance, Uchiko came up with a song, "We Miss You, Manelo." Yeah, it was not Manelo; it meant Mandela. You know, until 1994. And we have played a pivotal role as the creative arts fraternity and liberation of this country.
Mara, let's speak about music as a means to also mobilize communities as well. What would you say was different, especially within the era of the 60s, 70s, the 80s, or even the 90s, when it came to using music to really help people mobilize against what was then a very oppressive system?
Yeah, there were some beautiful songs written those years, but they had a bigger message than the ordinary. You think the song is as simple as Kauleza, Mama Kauleza, Jonga, Jonga. We were like warning the old ladies that Amapunu, they are coming, and fish uchwala, fish, you know, because those years, you know, our mothers and our grandmothers, they used to brew African beer, so you have to hide it when Ikwela is coming, otherwise everyone is going to get arrested. So there was a lot of songs, and for me, I mean, I take my hat off for people like Sis Dorothy Masuku, who wrote most of the songs, you know, that you hear, songs that were, some of them recorded by my friend, my dear friend Miriam Makeba, and my big brother, Brahu. And Dorothy Masuku had this eye and ear for wonderful sounds. And those songs were catchy. You know, an ordinary person in the streets would be singing along those songs. But those songs had a bigger message, which, you know, I once recorded a song. Unfortunately, it never made it to the airwaves. Yeah. It was called Light of a Clear Blue Morning. I can see the light of a clear blue morning. It was all about freedom is coming. And as soon as the record company heard freedom is coming, but never. This one is not leaving the studio. It stops right there. So it was very difficult. It was very difficult. You know, Koloi Libona, you wrote some songs for me. I don't know if you know Koloi Libona. Yes. Yeah. He wrote some songs. One of the songs was Maibui Africa, and it had Nkosi Sigelela within the song. That's another one that, what was his name? CCV. That studio, CCV, it was part of Galo or whatever. Okay. Peter Clad, he was there those years. Okay. And they just listened to those words, and it was like, bye-bye, no, you cannot be released. And I got discouraged. Yeah. You know, you get discouraged that, first of all, I wasn't prepared to go and sing something because this is the trend. You know, I know there was a song that Dumisani wrote for me, which I have to be honest, I hated it. I've never sang it since I left the studio. Yeah. That was the last time. It's called 50-50. I hated the song. I really did. Because it wasn't me. Yeah. It wasn't me. It wasn't my style. It wasn't my kind of music. But people loved it. It was like #1 on the charts. But I never opened my mouth to sing it anywhere in public. Like a studio. Yeah. And that was it. I said, I'm not singing this kind of music. Because it's like we're all trying to bunch us into. But it was very difficult as well, finding songs. You know, I mean, I had some songs written for me from people who were in exile. And to record those songs, I would have to go and do them somewhere else, but not here. Sure. Because in South Africa, they wouldn't be released. You know, one song was banned by the SABC. Can't even remember, Light of a Clear, I think it was Light of a Clear Blue Morning. There was this lady who used to censor anything. The minute the lyrics has got freedom in there,
then it's immediately censored.
Stops right there. Sure. So I kind of struggled to find songs that I could record, and I was not prepared to join the genre of a certain kind of genre because I just felt, I'm a ballad singer. I love jazz, I love ballads, I like music in the music and from musicals. So I wasn't going to follow the trend and say, okay, 50-50, make things, and easy.
Pakela, to take from Memara's assertions, it would seem that even though there are significant gains that have been made in the advent of democracy, problems still persist, especially within the music industry, when it comes to artists really understanding their rights and also when it comes to claiming royalties as well. How important is it for artists to really educate themselves to find out really the rights that protect them?
Yeah, it is imperative that we redress the injustices of the past. Yeah. Because they haven't been redressed. You know, I mean, when it comes to creative cultural policies, you know, they have not been touched. You know, I'm studying at VETS now, I'm doing cultural policy management, entrepreneurship. And it makes me feel like we are not in democratic democracy yet. We are in democracy. You know, because when you look at what the Minister Ngobeni wrote in those, drafted in those policies, and it is a true reflection of what a black man has to do to bring back an African heritage and African and reclaim our legacy. You know, but it has not been implemented. You know, it has not been implemented. Each and every minister that comes and goes has never even touched the writing of Dr. Ngobeni. You know, and how can we say we're free?
Sure.
You know, and there is no business like showbiz, Sismar.
Yes.
You know, and the creative arts fraternity as a whole can develop the economy of this country and sustain it, as it has done to America. I mean, it was only Michael Jackson and the Mom Aretha Franklin who sustained the economy of America. What stops us like
It's a very good question. And I take that to you, Memara. I think if there's one thing that COVID-19 or that era exposed to us are some of the challenges that artists themselves were experiencing, especially as the industry literally shut down. Would you say some progress has been made, especially to address some of the concerns that were raised by artists during that time?
I doubt if they have been addressed yet. There's so many challenges that artists faced, especially during COVID. I mean, COVID was, I don't know, Satan, some devil sent COVID, I'm telling you. Or if it was deliberately created, then it was evil, because the artists were one of the most affected in the arts industry. You couldn't go and perform anywhere. You couldn't go anywhere. You know, you couldn't. And some people, okay, they got into releasing their stuff through, you know, other channels. But basically being on stage in front of a crowd was next to impossible. Now, if you're not a recording artist, that was even more challenging for people who are not recording artists, people who depend on gigs, people who depend on going out to other countries and go and perform in Botswana, go and perform in that country, go and do some corporate event somewhere where there was nothing. And it was very cruel. And unfortunately, I don't think even the government was prepared for what was going to happen, especially when, you know, there was that relief fund, which I for one, I've never cried like I did. Now I'm known for crying, because I was one of the adjudicators for the relief fund, and having to turn down because the rules were that you only get this relief fund, which was very little. Okay, I think it was 20,000 per artist. Relief fund, which was the relief fund is basically just for you to go and buy your tengi papa, you know, just to eat, because you can't go and work anywhere. But for me, what was painful was the rules of distributing this relief fund. As one of the adjudicators, you have to have the artist applying for this relief fund. First of all, you must have a cancelled contract that says you had a contract that says you were going to be performing, and now because of COVID, you can't perform. Here's your contract, and it must be cancelled, not postponed. So that was a challenge, because how many artists do have a contract to go and do a festival? Some festivals, people just rock up, you know, you trust the promoter to book you, and you go and perform. And so if you don't have a contract, that is cancelled. And some artists some artists are artists out there who don't even have a bank account. So it's like, you know, okay, I want a bank account, so what's going to happen? Because you need a letter to say that you are paying tax. Are you tax compliant? It was the most, for me, it was the toughest job I've ever had to do. Actually, when they asked me, I thought, well, they're asking me to come and judge the relief fund. I started thinking of pop idols, you know, like I'm going to, having to turn certain people down because they didn't qualify according to the rules that came from government, from Department of Arts and Culture. Those were the rules, and we couldn't change those rules even if we liked somebody. There was just no way. So for me, it was tough for artists. It was tough for everybody, you know, and I pray every day that we never go through that again, ever again. But there's something needs to be done, you know, by our government, when it comes to artists don't have permanent jobs. There's got to be a way of supporting artists. I don't even know what words to use here, but there's got to be a way where artists are supported, those that they know that this artist and that artist cannot afford. They must wait till they get to 60 to you know. There's got to be a way of supporting them in terms of the artists themselves creating their own work. Get some starter packs somewhere, you know, to help them get started. Because sometimes it's difficult some artists struggle to even get a recording deal, you know, so if they could have a way where there's a studio that can accommodate a certain artist who has written a song, and you go in and then you release your song through whatever channels you can get it through instead of depending on a record company to sign you up. I don't know, but there's just too many artists who are talented, by the way. But they are struggling. They're really struggling. And 30 years into our democracy, you want to ask me maybe, how do I feel? There's been some good and there's been equally some unfortunate situations that have affected our artists. Some of our artists have committed suicide. I mean, we read about them. And it pains me, you know, not even long ago, recently, like just before the end of last year, I had to literally go and pray with someone who was planning to kill themselves. And because they've got no work, they can't find any gigs, you know, they've been totally written off. And there's also this thing of, when I say you're old, you know, and there's no one who's old in this, and you don't get old in this industry. I can still sing and I kick butt, you know. I can still sing, so don't tell me I'm old. You know, I mean, you look at artists overseas. You've seen people like Aretha Franklin, you were mentioning them. They sing until they drop. Ella Fitzgerald, they sing until they drop on stage. Miriam Makeba was struggling to find work here at home. She had to go overseas to work. And she dropped on stage and she passed away sadly during her performance. Because not here at home where they go, low sales, so you're old, you know. We want the younger ones, you know, we want to jiga, I don't know.
Memara, if you'll allow me, maybe let's get Pakela in, because I could sense that you're quite touched by some of the issues that Memara touched on right now. As we wrap up our conversation, give us your final thoughts.
My final thoughts on what Sismara has touched on is that I'm going to be very honest. Whilst we are still alive, we need to reclaim our territory. The Department of Arts and Culture is not supposed to be run by party politicians. It is supposed to be run by creative fraternity as a whole. You know, I mean, Department yamapolisa iranwa ngamapolice, you know, Department of Health iranwa ngabantu who have health qualifications, you know, and we are capable.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, in the 80s, there's one thing that we did in this country, and unitedly. You know, we stopped international music from playing here. We had cultural boycotts.
Well, I was president of SAMA then. You know, I was world president of SAMA, South African Musicians Alliance. Where we had to, you know, although we were under like the banner of a political party, we were under the UDF, which was under the African National Congress. And we had to shut certain places and say, no, we're not having these artists coming to perform at Sun City. No.
And they were not played on the radio.
And
on television.
We put our foot down. Because, first of all, I'm not against artists coming. I mean, we go out and perform in these countries. I'm not against that. But there's got to be some kind of 50-50 here. You know?
We must have our rules.
Our rules.
And regulations.
There's so many other things that some of these overseas artists do not even adhere to those rules. I don't even know that they pay tax when they get paid those millions. I don't know what the deal is. But the most that has to happen is that each show that brings an overseas, they must have at least 2 of our own artists in the country. Maybe one well-known, maybe another one who's a starter pack, who's just beginning, so that they can get lifted from, you know, years ago I performed with American groups, many years before the cultural, but I performed with the Main Ingredients. I was on tour with Dobie Gray and the Main Ingredients, with Johnny Mathis, with, you know, all the jazz artists, Stanley Tarrantine. And it was great because just being on that stage, it kind of lifted my profile.
It breaks my heart to interrupt you, but unfortunately we have run out of time. It's conversations like this that really make me think that, you know, it does deserve more airtime, where we can speak about issues especially affecting artists themselves. As we conclude our discussion with Louw as well as Mercy Pakela.